Welcome to another Through the Bible. Today we're doing the book of Galatians.
What's the Bible with Brian and Jessica.
With Brian and Jessica and all of them.
It's Buck Denver.
And me.
We have another epistle today written by Paul.
I thought like we have another epic. You said epistle.
It's a great book. Riley said this is one of his favorite books.
That Riley or this Riley?
Riley's
It's
excited.
been endorsed by Riley.
Riley Demmer.
Old Riley.
This is an earlier letter that Paul wrote. We've talked about some of these issues already that Paul is addressing. But guess which missionary journey Paul planted the churches? This is multiple churches in the Galatia region, not just one city. Which missionary journey? 1, 2, or 3?
2.
Who thinks it was 2? Raise your hand.
2.
Who thinks it was 3? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was missionary journey number 1? Raise your hand. Number 1 is correct.
It was the earliest of his letters.
Yes. This is one the early letter. This is pre-Jerusalem Council. What did they deal with mostly at the Jerusalem Council?
That was on my test yesterday.
What? Go to Bible college. You'll just get a repeat of Sunday school, guys. Yes, this one's free.
That's more important.
What did they mostly debate and deal with at the Jerusalem Council? What issue?
It was the law and what to do with it? Wait, no.
Well, the law, yes, but what law? Yes, which altogether, the law and circumcision, everything, what meant to be a Christian, but also Jewish, right? The Jerusalem Council mostly dealt with the issue of, do Christians need to also be Jewish?
Yeah, I got the question right.
Do we have to be Jewish as well as Christian to be saved? No, we do not. Why was this hard for them?
Because the people who first got saved were Jewish.
Yes, because Jesus was Jewish. The first Christians were Jewish. And so much of what it meant to be a Christian to them also included Judaism, right? It was a fulfillment of the Jewish law, right? Like God did this on purpose. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random chance that all the first Christians were Jews. God wanted Christianity, the new covenant, Jesus to come out of the Jewish people and the Jewish law. That was on purpose. It was so that we could understand why Jesus had to die for our sins. Otherwise, it'd just be a random like, oh, guess what? By the way, you're a sinner. What is that? I don't know. And oh, by the way, God had to die for you. Why? I don't know. Why do we know? We understand because the law tells us what's right and wrong. It identifies what sin is. It also identifies that sin separates us from God. And we need, what did the Jews have to do regularly to pay for their sins? Make sacrifices. So they had all the sacrifices and all the holidays and the Passover, all these different things were teaching us what God required. So that we would understand when Jesus came, the fulfillment of all that, the perfection of all that. No longer do we have to repeat sacrifices over and over because one and done, the best sacrifice of all was done of God himself, his son Jesus on the cross to pay for all sins once and for all. So if we didn't have the Old Testament, if it wasn't in the context of Judaism, it'd be hard to understand. It wouldn't make sense. So God is an incredible God with patience and a wonderful plan of doing this with the Jews for 2,000 years, making them his people to produce the Messiah, promised to Abraham. Through the Jewish people, he would what? The whole world.
Bless the whole world.
Bless the whole world would be blessed through Abraham's descendant. Who is? Jesus is ascended from Abraham.
Come on, guys. You gotta do better than this.
Whew, so, but now we see that it causes a problem. So Paul wrote this letter to the churches.
Wait, is this part of the purpose, basically?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Oh.
So, not to one specific church, but to the churches in the region of Galatia. Pop open your map.
Like saying Whatcom County.
Oh my goodness, my map's like...
Or Washington.
And then look in the journey number 1, remember? We see, what cities do you see in the region of Galatia? You see Galatia out there?
I don't think I have maps left.
Yeah.
What cities are there?
Antioch.
Antioch. What's the other one?
Where was Paul born in Antioch?
Iconium, Lystra, Derbe. So those are some of the cities that had churches in them where Paul planted churches. Paul, who was with Paul on his first missionary journey? Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas planted these churches. And then he went back to where? Where did he leave and return to?
Jerusalem.
Leave from and return to? Not Jerusalem.
Dang it. I guessed.
Antioch. The Antioch by the sea, okay? There's two Antiochs. You see one in Galatia, right? So confusing. But the Antioch, this is kind of Paul's home base. This is where, after he became a Christian, he spent time there, growing as a Christian, having visions with Jesus, which would have been awesome, and establishing himself. And then he was sent out on this first missionary journey from the church there. This was like really after the Jerusalem church was really persecuted. I mean, Jerusalem is still the hub and center for Christianity, but Antioch became the growing center of missions and sending out. It was safer to be a Christian there than it was in Jerusalem, and it became a major Christian city. You excited?
Well, this was literally my test I took on Thursday, and so now I'm
So-
trying to figure out if I got questions right or wrong.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. All right, so audience is not a specific church body, which again is cool, because I don't know if you've ever felt weird about like we're reading somebody else's mail when we read Paul's letters. But we talked about how the Romans, that's a federal crime, by the way. Opening someone else's mail is a federal crime. Okay, but we get to do it every day, guys. When we read the Bible, read someone else's mail.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not
No,
every
they're
single
not
piece of the
always.
letter.
So, but we talked about like with Romans, how it even talks about how it was distributed, right? So this happened back then. It was distributed because it's so good. More people need to read it.
So good.
And it's good now. This letter was actually not just addressed to a single person, like some of the letters are, even an individual or a single church, but to churches in the region of Galatia.
I feel like nowadays it's like when someone is texting you and you screenshot and blast them. Like that's the way we share private information now, is like not gonna be like screenshot someone's text, you know? We don't read people's mail anymore. We just like share screenshots.
Definitely
And then also, it's kind of like an open letter. Have you ever heard of that? Sometimes you'll write an open letter, which is in purpose to be distributed. So this is an open letter, and we get to read it too. These churches, 49 AD, one of the earliest letters. Does anyone have their timeline still? Like, did we put it in the right spot?
I do!
Did we put it early like we should have?
What do you mean?
Because it's early in the
We read the
timeline.
books of the Bible in chronological order.
In the
We pasted
chronological
them
order.
on
Just
the,
want to check.
Galatians is during Acts.
Yeah, okay.
It's
Wow,
like
we
with Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Ephesians, and Philippians.
So we put it early. Yeah, it's in the earliest book. Central Turkey. Also, cool fact. Paul met a special guy on this trip who he would become his disciple, and he'd write him a couple letters. Who is it? Timothy! Timothy was from this area, Derbe and Lystra. Paul would have met, Paul and Barnabas would have met Timothy on this, and been like, this kid is sweet, this kid is awesome. So on his first missionary journey, this is Timothy's hometown, which is pretty cool. So main characters, we got Paul.
Peter.
We got Peter. Why is Peter in this?
Because he had some stuff that Paul got mad at.
Yes. Titus. Oh, Barnabas, sorry. Titus. Abraham. Why is Abraham in this?
Talk about the law.
Yes, because Abraham
Getting stuff.
was the very first Jew, but guess what he did not have?
The law.
The law.
No law,
Yeah, no
but he
law.
was a Jew, and he was a follower of God, but not under the law.
The law?
So Paul talks about this, using him as an illustration. Isn't that cool
That
to
was
think
in
about?
Romans 5.
That you can be a Jew without the law,
That was
right?
That was Romans 5. Like Romans 5 is a lot of that too, being like sin. The law showed us our sin, but sin still happened when we didn't have the law.
Yes, that sin still happens even outside the law, like no longer under the law and still following
So
God.
Abraham's time up until Moses is an interesting thing.
Yes, it is an interesting period of time. And also false teachers. So there was literally a group What do we call them? Any guesses on the group that tried to make them Jewish? Yes. Judaizers. Boom, Kai. Nice. So the Judaizers.
Oh, I didn't see that, but
Yeah,
we're doing
no.
the same thing in school.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Judaizers are the group that's coming in after Paul planted these churches and trying to fix them, right? Because they're Jewish, right? So it's easy for them, and they're tied to Judaism, and they're coming to Gentiles who never grew up Jewish, aren't Jewish, and they're like, hey, you got to be like us to be a Christian, okay? Now, this seems like a weird issue because we have solved most of this, and it also helps that all of us, unless some of you, does anyone have Jewish heritage? I've had students who have
It's
Jewish
actually
heritage.
very interesting talking to people who are Jewish Messianic
But,
Jews. Like,
okay, so all of us are Gentiles in this room, so we're not really wrestling with this issue. But what is a comparable issue that we may find to wrestle with in our church? Andrew. Legalism, yes. What is legalism?
It's where they're like really mean. They like reward the good and just hate the bad.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Specifically, more specific. Anyone? What is legalism?
It's
Riley?
It's when you value the law to a higher degree than maybe like it was meant for, kind of like what the Pharisees did, where they lost the purpose of the law.
Yes.
And they just tried to follow it.
The letter of the law, not the spirit of the law.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
when
and
doing right
specifically,
law was more important than your heart.
yeah, more important of the heart. And so specifically, when you are striving, you are being convicted about a certain law to obey, and then you transfer that conviction to others in a harsh way. So maybe you really feel convicted that this is the way to live life, and maybe watching movies hasn't been healthy for you, and it's not a good thing, right? And so in your heart, you feel convicted that you shouldn't watch movies, and you make that decision to not watch movies. That's totally fine, right? Where that crosses a line is now where you start telling everyone, hey, you can't watch movies. Movies are a sin. Movies are evil. Like those aren't Christians in there. They say bad words and bad things happen. Like, how dare you watch a movie, right? That's legalism because you've taken a personal conviction, which might be right for you, because God might have convicted you in that area, and you take something that's not like clearly sin, like total. It's a gray thing, like the media we consume. Should we be careful about that? Yes. But you apply that to other people, and you judge them and try to convict them and tell them how to live their lives in a harsh and convicting way, and try to rule over other people's lives. That's legalism, okay? And there's churches that will be more legalistic about, and it's funny, it's some of the same issues, like Sunday behaviors, what you can do and not do on Sunday. That was probably the largest group of legalistic laws for the Jews, for the Pharisees we talked about. They had all the things, right? They added to or tried to define what does it mean to obey this, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Well, you know what? And do no work. That's part of it originally. Well, what is work? Well, you know what? A full glass of water, that's work. So only half full glasses of
Or
water.
how about you can walk this far but not that
Or
far.
you know what? Walking a mile, that's work. So you can only walk half a mile. Stuff like that. They added hundreds of very specific rules to what it meant to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, do no work. Right? So Jesus ran into that law in particularly the most. We're just reading through Harmony of the Gospel when he's healing people on the Sabbath. When his disciples are picking some grain as they walk by and eating it. Like, yeah, that's work. You're harvesting grain. It's like, I was hungry. I picked up some food. I'm sorry. Like to this getting so on them and telling them they're evil for what they're doing, right? So this is all in the same vein. Now, specifically, we're dealing with Jewish issues, which we don't face, but all this can very much be applied to us not living legalistic, judging others' lives, but living in what? Freedom! Yes!
I was going to say fellowship.
America.
Freedom. The freedom that following Christ is. We didn't to experience God's freedom, not to be saved from sin, not to be still burdened by the law and sin and enslaved, like still, like following the law to the nth degree at every little specific thing. Like the Jews, the Pharisees, they were supposed to tithe, right? You know what they would do? They'd be like, oh, salt and pepper. 10% of my salt, 10% of my pepper, and I'll give it away. Because they like so down to the letter of the law, they're supposed to give 10% of their stuff to God.
Well, then what you just do is you have one friend and you just give 10% to them and they give 10% to you.
Give it the truth. Anyway, that's what too much of the law is. We are saved to freedom, not, yes.
I was actually thinking about contextualizing the gospel for other cultures.
Yeah.
I was thinking about like when we think about what happened in Canada with the Catholic Church to reach Native Canadians. And like their goal was just to be like, you need to become
civilized,
white civilized man to like take the gospel.
Right. This is so critically important in missions, which essentially this is, right? Paul was on a missionary journey, taking the gospel to different people, cross-cultural, from Paul, who was a Jew, to these Gentile, Turkey region, I don't know what, Galatians. Yeah, they're Galatians, this people group of Galatians. And he brought them the gospel, and then their church looked different than the one in Antioch. It wasn't exactly the same. And then the Judaizers come along and try to make it exactly the same. You guys need to do this. You guys need to be circumcised. You guys need to do this. You can't eat that food. You can't do this. Like all the Jewish law now comes down on them. So the purpose of this book is to refute the Judaizers. What does it mean to refute?
To reprimand.
Yeah, to correct and oppose. The Judaizers taught the Gentile believers must obey the Jewish law in order to be saved, to refute those false teachers, and to call Christians to faith and freedom in Christ, which is what the gospel is about. You're going to put that in your summary?
I have a summary sentence that talks about the entire book.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to stick on better time. It is 10:30, which means it's time for the video. I made the outline once again that Jessica's going to put up. It follows the Bible Project's outline. I've done different sources for my outline. So this, you can kind of fill it in off the board while you're watching the Bible Project video. It's really good. And we'll learn more about the specific topics that Paul hits in the letter of Galatians. Why is it important that this letter is placed before the Jerusalem Council? Any thoughts?
Because it's probably what made the Jerusalem Council happen.
Yeah, well, and Peter actually is corrected in the Jerusalem Council, and is corrected. What does it mean to be corrected? And accept the correction. I don't know. Yeah. Well, he like apologizes almost, because Paul confronts Peter on this, what he did, and brings this issue to light. Because what was Peter doing essentially when he is eating with the Gentiles, and then all of a sudden the Jews come around and he's not doing that anymore? Yeah.
He gave in to peer pressure.
It's kind of like peer pressure. Like the people he's around, it's like he kind of changes his behavior, right? We do this all the time too. Like the group we're with kind of act a certain way, and we feel like we need to be this type of person here. It's not being authentic. I don't think Peter believed that the Jews needed to do, or the Gentiles needed to become Jewish and all this, but he, in his behavior,
He feared the
was kind of
more.
fearing them and kind of like falling in line, right? There's one interesting thing. You know, I find this interesting. I'm not going to say Paul's right or wrong on it, but what does Paul have Timothy do?
He's circumcised.
He has him get circumcised, which is interesting.
Because of the church that he
Timothy
was in.
is a Gentile, right? He's from this very region.
Wasn't Timothy's like
Paul,
family though? Like his mom was.
his grandma was Jewish.
His grandma was Jewish.
But he's not circumcised, right?
He did it to be like, I need to be all things to all people. Like,
Yeah, that's
so
how he
right
talks
now,
about
you
it,
just
right?
need to do this.
Because he's bringing Timothy back to Jerusalem or Antioch with him,
And the church wasn't going to accept him
and
Yeah,
and
he's basically
basically so
like-
he can be accepted.
as a leader.
So he kind of does it for the
Meet your
church in
brother.
Jerusalem, not for Timothy, right?
Right.
But there's this interesting line, like it's almost but that's how he talks about it, to be things to all things to all people. I kind of wish he wouldn't have though, and been like, hey, this is okay. Timothy can be uncircumcised. He doesn't have to do this. It kind of feels like a little
Oh my gosh, that was so scary.
bit of a compromise, but yeah, that's what he chooses to do with Timothy specifically. All right, is Jesus in this?
Yes.
No, he's not. at all.
JK. He's always
Well, the whole gospel is from Jesus, so it's definitely the gospel is reiterated, and Jesus saves us. Specifically, Jesus comes out of Judaism. Jesus was
Jewish.
Jewish.
Stickers all over campus.
Jesus was Jewish. You have stickers about
Well,
that?
because the Jewish studies majors like that. Right?
Oh yeah. There's a popular when I was a kid bumper sticker that says, "My boss is a Jewish carpenter." You guys have never seen that before.
Oh
It's
my
awesome.
gosh, Brian, I totally get you, man.
They were everywhere in the 90s. All right. Jesus came out of Judaism to fulfill Judaism, to bring a new covenant, not just to add to Judaism. A new covenant I give you. Jesus fulfilled the Jewish law. The old what do we do with the Old Testament? That's an important question here. What do we do with the Torah? Why is it still in our Bible if we're just Christians now?
Well, the Gideons just give us a New
history.
Testament.
We
so-
want to understand it. We
Yeah.
want to understand.
We'd be like, where are all these prophecies from?
Right. Yeah, the New Testament constantly refers and references to the Old Testament. We would be missing so much if we didn't have it. But are
also the
we
record of
subject to the Old Testament law?
Well, there's 3 different categories of law that sometimes we like. So there's like I can't remember what they're called.
In its totality, no.
No.
We're not subject to the law, right? We're not obeying all the laws. Like, when's the last time you sacrificed a goat?
Oh, I did it in class today.
There's
Actually.
two different kinds of thread in my
You
clothing.
did?
Yeah. Who has mixed fibers in your clothes? That's a good one, Henry.
Yeah.
What's mixed
Do you
up?
have
Those Bella Canvas
check your
mixed
check your
ones are
thing? Is
great.
it half polyester, half cotton? Because that's against the Jewish law. So
Did you eat a cheeseburger?
cheeseburgers
Do
against the
not
Jewish
cook a
law.
young cow in its mother's milk.
Yeah, you're mixing meat
They could be
and
different cows.
milk. Don't do that, right? So there's a lot of things that we laugh at and think are obscure, but these are some of the issues that
Even
they were
kill the
trying to
fly.
face. Jews followed these things.
See,
So
Galatians just wanted to eat ham.
Ellie referred real quick to the 3 categories. I think I've taught this to you guys
Yeah,
before.
you got it.
But civil law, which dealt with like the country of Israel was a country. So sometimes they had like, if you do this, this is the punishment for the crime, right? Like that's a civil law. Like you're speeding, you get a fine. You do this, you get jail time. Like that's our civil law. We're not in the country of Israel. Second is ceremonial laws. So all the things like to temple worship,
Like David.
following, sacrifices and all that. We're not under that. We're not under that covenant of what it means to be Jewish anymore. But there are still moral laws. What's a moral law that you can think of in the Old Testament?
Don't murder.
Don't murder. Don't
The
commit
10
adultery. The
Commandments.
10 Commandments. And the Sabbath one is where it gets into like, hey, is this a Jewish law or is this a moral law? Right? And so how do we handle that? Guess what day we go to church on?
Sunday.
Not the Sabbath.
Not Saturday.
You guys, you're all breaking the Sabbath.
You are too.
You should have been here yesterday. So why do we go to church on Sunday?
And Jesus was resurrected on Sunday.
Jesus was resurrected on Sunday, the first day of the week. Why do you think the church started making its special day on Sunday?
To be different.
2 reasons. That reason, they would go to church all the time, right? They would get together. But they would celebrate the resurrection every Sunday. It was like Easter every Sunday,
When
right?
did they start shifting their work day? Like, because they would work Sunday through Friday. At what point did they decide that?
Not in other countries. I mean, like it was not necessarily that. That was a Jewish thing.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
So
like,
this is America, and in America,
So I'm saying, did the early Christians decide to make Sunday their new Sabbath and basically took 2 Sabbaths? I'm curious.
so I'm saying in Galatia, they wouldn't have had Sabbath off.
Ever. Okay.
Like I don't really know what the Roman work week was like,
Okay.
but like that was a very
So
much
maybe, how about
a Jewish
when
thing.
did Jewish Christians decide to make Sunday their Sabbath? And then how did they adjust their work week? That's an interesting.
I think
That's
more.
what I'm gonna ask tonight.
I think more. I'm sorry, I'm going to go study this. I think more the early Christians to differentiate themselves from the Judaizers mainly, and Christians specifically, that Sunday became the most special day because of the pattern of celebrating the resurrection on Sunday. And that I mean, probably go back to Constantine, I would guess, and when that became the special day, as far as like mandated Roman, when the Roman Empire became Christian, I'm guessing that's when it became like an actual thing, like Sunday day off type thing, because the Roman Empire adopted Christianity under Constantine because Nero and everyone tried to burn all the Christians and blame everything bad on the Christians, and was like it was a war essentially within Roman Empire of Christianity versus paganism.
Okay,
I'm way over time. All right, key verse 5:1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. We have been set free from sin. We are no longer bound by sin, enslaved by sin. It is for freedom that you have been set free. Don't bind yourself again once to legalism or to Judaism. Timeless truth. Don't do anything to the
Law.
Wrong.
No.
That's incorrect.
don't
Here, should we give him this
Does it
one?
not do? I already wrote it. I thought you said it was
No.
right. Oh, don't.
I was trying to follow his train of thought. Don't add
Anything
To the
to
Bible.
the Bible.
To the gospel.
law.
to the gospel. Don't add anything to the gospel, right? That's Paul's big idea. Why he brings up Abraham. Abraham was saved by faith alone. The most important Jew, maybe. Moses, too.
Maybe.
But the first Jew, at least, right? Abraham, the father of the Jewish nation. He didn't have the law. All he had was faith and obeying God.
So
And-
are the Ishmaelites Jews then because they're sons of Abraham?
They are sons of Abraham, but they are not what God defined as his chosen race.
Oh, okay.
So God does bless Ishmael because he's descended from Abraham, but he's not what God described to Abraham as, I'll make your descent. Well, I guess they're his descendants too, so there's numbers. But like the blessing of I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse
And
you,
Hagar
all the
was
nations will be
different,
blessed because of you, goes specifically
It's
to
different, too.
Isaac and his descendants. So there's a different blessing for
Ishmael.
Ishmael. We are free. Don't be bound.
We're also
Don't
free
join
to leave.
slavery.
I thought you
You're
meant
also
you are
free to leave.
leave.
Go and